Hello, everyone. It's spoiler time again. For those of you that are here to see it live, we will be presenting it very shortly, and we both are very excited about the card we get to preview.
Yeah, we absolutely are, and we're really happy to that we have the chance to spoil this card.
Yeah, even though we had very, very, very little prep time. So if it seems like we're kind of like shooting from the hip here, it's because we entirely are. We had like a 10-minute conversation about this card before we started, and that's basically it.
I think we're gonna discuss it anyway, and of course you're happy to give your opinion in the chat. And as last time, we'll do just spoil the card, set it in a bit of a context, and then have a discussion afterwards.
Yep. Well, on that note, why don't we get right to it and start the intro that you told me I shouldn't do?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, as promised, we're not going to make you wait too long. So we are going to talk about the Lasombra preview and then have a really brief discussion afterwards about V5 politics and how much this card is going to end up making a pretty significant impact on V5 overall. So let's kind of get right to it, unless you got something more to say before we start talking about the card itself.
Yeah. No, I think you should go right to it.
All right. Well,
there are two cards which
I like to say that they fornicated and produced an offspring here.
Well, not quite, but somewhat. And what I like about the card is that it is, as far as I know, a new mechanic which hasn't been on a politics card before.
Yep.
And one which I think might change how some games go.
Yeah. So the two cards that we're referencing, there are other cards you can reference as well, but here I want to reference the Sleeping Mind in the way that this card's going to prove to function, and Banishment. So some of the function of Sleeping Mind, actually a little more of the function than Sleeping Mind, and a pretty close effect to Banishment, but obviously not entirely, because we can't just be slapping around banishments that also make it so that your vampire can't do anything while things are happening.
I even argue it might be in some situations better than Banishment.
I would ultimately agree with you, because unlike Banishment, this card is going to end up leaving the minion behind so that you're not in that situation where, like, you harm your prey, but now your prey isn't putting pressure on their prey, so then their prey kind of gets a little bit of a juice that they shouldn't have in certain situations. But shall we get right down to it and show them what it is?
Yeah.
All right. This card is called Expulsion. And boy, is it an interesting card.
Oh, yeah. It is a card which requires a Primogen or Prince. And you can choose political action, of course, but you can choose up to 2 minions, so you're free to choose one if you want to, or even none. And successful referendum means that the chosen minions cannot play reaction cards, cannot block, and cannot cast votes or ballots this entire term. And in the brief discussion we had before, we were arguing about which deck it would fit best or enhance best, and Steve was arguing that Ventru would profit a lot from this.
Yeah, so to me, this is like the dream Ventru card. The Ventru want this card above all else. The idea that we've already got the political power, we've already got the clout we need, and now we can just, if this is successful, obviously, end up in a situation where you expulsion out the vampires that are the biggest problem for you, either because they deflect or because they are able to put too many votes back against something. You use your one-time clout to get your vote across, to get this vote across, shut them out, and then either swing forward on them with whatever you need to finish them off, or toss your political actions out there and make sure they are no longer a threat to you on the table.
Yeah, and I was arguing for Malkavians because Malkavians are not typical voters, but got a bit of a push with the last V5 cards. And for example, Juliet Power has little ways to get a referendum through, but if you're able to play, for example, Malkavian Rider Clause, get expulsion through, you have shifted table balance in your favor because up to 2 minions who want to vote against you can't. And so you can pull either Juliet's special off, or you can just bleed and don't worry about deflection. Okay, still up on investigation, but the bounce, the amount of bounce should reduce somewhat, possibly, because people were complaining about V5. And I think it's a good reaction from BCP about the amount of bounce present,
Yeah.
the amount of bleed, even.
I mean, to me, I am happy. First of all, if they'd have went with my suggestion that no one ever was going to take, ever, but no deflection, I mean, the game, in my opinion, would be improved. But I might have some sort of personal hatred of deflection. I might have had some previous trauma related to deflection that just causes me to have like PTSD flashbacks every time I see this card, see deflection get thrown out on the table. But it really is nice to see a card like this that says like, okay, deflection is a lot less of a point. You can't necessarily stop every vampire with this card, but the key vampires with superior deflection that are sitting on the table are going to be your obvious targets. And sure, somebody's going to have inferior and maybe be able to bounce this. But also, the other thing I just thought of, again, remember, we're doing this in real time, is this also stops certain titled vampires from being able to wake up other titled vampires on the table, because now they cannot play reaction cards any further.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that one.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, we only had 15 minutes. There's only so much you can talk about then. But I think this card is absolutely incredible. I expect to see it played in quite a few Camarilla decks. We also talked about the Toreador potentially taking advantage of this card, especially with their fortitude and the fact that they have the ability to be unblockable.
Yeah. And you pointed out that you possibly don't need as many Grand Balls, but could start off if there's one established, and I don't know, maybe Diana calls expulsion and someone else is open for the next two.
Yeah.
So even bleed with Grand Ball is more relevant now.
Yep. It's gonna shift it's gonna shift the V5 environment really well. I think it'll go even outside of the V5 format pretty significantly. I think that like a lot of law firm decks are going to be stocking this card pretty heavily, or at least in 3 to 7 of potentially.
Yeah. And what I like about it, AC Bishop commented for Molly McDonald, another card she cannot use. And of course, you're right. But I think it's nice that Primogen get another little push. Like,
yeah.
They can play Camarilla's Iron Fist now, but everybody can. Every titled vampire can, but now they have something which makes Primogen worth.
Yeah. As you and I have both discussed, anything that gives a little bit more to Primogen is basically to us kind of essential to the game. all the titles should have some kind of relevance aside from I contribute votes, and they should feel like they contribute meaningfully.
Yeah. And as I said, I think it's sometimes better than banishment because, as you said, just it doesn't take off the tempo from the table as banishment does.
Yeah. Absolutely. That you can be in really bad situations where you throw off tempo so bad because you banish out your praise vampire, or even worse, you have to banish backwards, and now you've basically given your grand predator the ability to become your new predator for the low price of you getting to survive for one extra turn. I've seen that happen a good number of times where like the expectation of how big their grand predator can push is just completely underestimated. Banish out somebody, and then suddenly, oh, meet the new boss, much different than the old boss.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to say about the card before we kind of move on to the rest of our discussion?
I think we should move on.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and post this in the Discord if people want to have more of a chat about it in the VTest Discord. So it's there if you want to continue the chat about the card. In the meantime, what we're going to do here is have a short little discussion about how politics currently looks in V5 and where this card could fall, whether it's going to be a good enough hit, a bad enough hit, etc. And that starts with looking at the politics by the numbers. And I think this is a really important thing to do when thinking about it, because oftentimes people will try to tell you, oh, there's plenty of political cards, there's not enough political cards, but they really don't have a number. They really can't give you a substantial thing. Or they'll say there's too many voters, not enough voters, or they're not dispersed well enough, what have you. So let's start by looking at how many voters are there. There's a lot. There are 60 titled vampires that currently exist in V5. It's a lot of titled vampires. What do you think?
Yeah. And people also somewhat rightfully complained in the past few years about the amount of titles being on the field. But I think it just shows that maybe another approach to politics might be in order.
I would agree. I think that this is what BCP is sort of trying to gear towards. In the past years, it's felt like politics has been I'll call it a big dogs game. The vampires with the highest titles, often inner circle members, end up hitting the table early on, sort of dominating the politics scene, and then creating kind of this problematic circumstance. The Anarchs were always able to do things, but could oftentimes struggle. There have been some other weird decks, like the Arashot decks and other decks that also managed to get there. You've, of course, got Ventrue Law Firm decks that can do it as well. But ultimately, like, politics has always existed kind of in this realm that is too far separated from the rest of the other deck archetypes. And what we see here is a better spread. More vampires who are relevant at lower capacities being able to create a meaningful amount of votes on the table in stuff that's going on.
And what we also realized in the past few games we played is that it also forces you to actually do politics on the table because no one has vote lock. And I think in this regard, the expulsion is quite nice because it is not another bleed like substitute like KRC or Camarada's Iron Fist or what's it called by amongst? I don't remember right now.
There's Revolutionary Council and there's the other one.
It comes to mind.
Reckless Agitation.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, these are bleed substitutes, which have the point. But I think it's nice to have some table shaping mechanics.
Yeah, And only one clan has sort of a really painful problem here in that they have no voters at all, and that's the Ravnos. One people have argued, and I don't necessarily disagree with them right now, that the Ravnos are kind of a weaker-ish version of the Ministry. I think they have their own strengths that make them stronger. I have heard people say they're stronger, but I feel like most of what I hear is they're a slightly weakened version of the Ministry, but I think that will change as cards start to come out. But the real key to what we're saying, the real like proof in the pudding here, is that of the most dominant clans with 3 or more titled vampires, the most dominant clans have at least 3 or more vampires who are at least capacity 8 or who are capacity 8 or less. This means they're easy to curve into. This means that you're most likely to have more than one of them on the table at any given time, and they usually are very impactful. If you look at the list that's here on the screen, you can actually see quite a number of these vampires, and just like you'll even from memory identify the impact you've probably seen them have on a game, while also still contributing politically. Thought maybe you would have a reply to that, Jan, maybe an argument here.
No, actually, no, but I think 8 caps are quite nice, and most of the B5 clan leading do have a special which is helpful.
Yeah, and makes up for the fact that they are at the top of the curve, but still within the curve. But then we also need to talk about the political cards that exist, because this is another thing where people say there aren't enough impactful in V5. And I think this is also slowly becoming less relevant an argument. There's still some argument I think that can be had here, but let's look at the cards that are here. There are 23 political actions total. Go ahead.
And I'd say the most impactful cards, like not everything, but the most impactful cards are in V5 already.
Mm-hmm.
And what I figured, like this is speculation, but I feel like that most of the last cards which were introduced by BCP, like reinforcement was reprinted and confiscation, aim a bit more on a table impact effect.
Mm-hmm. But an essential table impact effect. We've seen, thanks to the museum, we have seen a large increase in the number of decks that run equipment. And confiscation really does a lot to try to fix it. I think it's underplayed right now, but I think as more people and as politics seems to feel a little bit more viable, confiscation will see a little bit more play. I think part of it is that no one's really cracked what the most key equipment to be concerned with are, but I do feel like it's a very underutilized card.
Yeah, take off that Sword of the Archangel.
Comes up far less often.
Yeah.
I also think I've been pushing this card for years, so I know I'm a little biased when I say this, but I really do think Disputed Territory needs to be a standard in any political deck. I seem to see that like it doesn't happen as often. I've been guilty of it myself, but there have been so many times in V5 where if you can resolve like stealing a location, you've probably screwed up somebody's strategy enough to put them on tilt. Whoops. Go back here. So of these 23 cards, by the way, 11 of these cards cause pool loss in some way. So almost half of the cards that are political cards will be able to work towards killing your opponent. And in a pretty significant way.
Yeah. And like we don't need to discuss Cameron's Iron Fist or character shit. But
But you have other cards that like often get used. You've got Neonate Breach, which is amazing at being able to like help very rapidly eliminate the Weenies deck off the table. There's still Domain Challenge, which sometimes goes overlooked by people as a very viable card in the right deck archetype. There's also, of course, Reigns of Power, which we've seen play before, but I think it's becoming rapidly more viable in V5 as well.
Yeah, and now I'm doing something which you didn't want me to, but anyway. And I think when we look at the cards, which might be added to the card pool, again, this is speculative.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. We don't have any new spoilers. Could be, for example, cards like which help to put up tempo, like Political Flux, or which enable different actions.
Yeah.
So I need to check which I. Consanguineous Condemnation.
Yes, is release is going to be new to V5.
Yeah, I mean it is not released, but I think it might fit quite well into locking your opponent, making him open for at least some bleeds.
Yeah. All in all, though, I think this card, Expulsion, is a welcome addition to the political environment. I feel like overall politics is actually really strong. It just does require more work to make it happen. And I feel like that's important for VTES. This is ideally a game where you're supposed to socialize, and it should take effort to defeat your opponent.
Because I think that's the idea of you getting your political action through almost every time, like if you get to the voting step, is not fitting. And I think talking more fits into the idea of VTES, and also makes it a little bit more of its own having its own characteristics more than before.
Yeah. And that's, to me, what the game should be about. It should be every decision shouldn't just be, I turn my guy sideways, I do some damage. I turn my guy sideways, I do some damage. If that's the game we're going to play, I mean, there's other games you could play that are far worse than this one, still, obviously, but that do that more simply, right? If you want to turn people sideways and do damage, I'm not going to name any other games because, let's face it, they're all bad, and you might go try them, and then you might spend money in a game that sucks. So I'm not going to suggest anything right here. But I will say that, like, the thing that has always locked me into this game, and the thing that first drew me into it, was the concept of politics. The idea of having these cards that had a slightly higher level of power, that could do these very interesting things. I was a big fan of Dramatic Upheaval. Big surprise here. I like moving seat order around. But I really found that card has a real, like, special place in my heart. I know it's banned along with another card I loved, which was Succubus Club, but they were the essence of what VTES was supposed to be. It's supposed to be a game where not only does your skill at playing the cards matter, but also your ability to sell what you're doing the right way, and to really utilize that ability to create the situations you need to bring yourself closer to winning the game.
Yeah. But speaking about old cards, I hope Reversal of Fortunes doesn't get reprinted. Because I think this wouldn't impact the game in a good way.
No.
If it would be more prevalent now.
I would be very surprised for that card to return. As much as I think Reversal of Fortunes is a cute card, I don't think it does a lot for the game itself.
Yeah, but do you want to go to Expulsion again for the people who joined in later?
Sure. Let me jump back to that slide. So yeah, just one last time. Expulsion is the card we previewed. If you Don't if you miss it here or you want to discuss more about it outside of our podcast, we do have it posted on the Vampire: The Eternal Struggle official Discord, and people have already begun a little bit of discussion about it. In fact, Carl recently threw in that the card works on allies, which you normally could not banish off the table.
Yeah. And Acrimone said banishment is better in terms of table management, but this card is a tactical piece. And I think this kind of nails it on the spot. They have different ideas behind them, but I absolutely think it's a playable card.
Absolutely. This card is going to be a powerhouse. If it is not, I would be very surprised, and one day you'll get to watch me eat a copy of this card. Maybe in person, maybe on stream, but I believe in eating my words, and this literally, with the preview text on it, is like having my words. So, on that though... On that, though, unfortunately, we have to wrap up a little early because I have quite a busy schedule today. But Jan and I do want to be able to have a podcast that doesn't involve a preview at some point in the very near future. But it's been a bit of a hassle for us trying to get schedules to work out. But hopefully we can get something to you in the next few weeks, maybe month-ish, if we can.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. And have a nice day and take care.
You too. Bye-bye.